Hello and welcome to episode 21, Her Finance Talk. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Sue Diamond and I'm your host. And our goal is to help women create a better relationship with their money so you can live your best life. So thanks for joining us today and investing in your financial well-being. Her Finance Talk is brought to you by the Her Finance Club. And our mission is to socialize the idea that it's okay for women to talk about money because knowledge is power. And when knowledge helps you become more independent, it translates to empowerment. So women empowering women is a mantra that we love to live by and one that has helped to inspire women for decades. Where would we be without each other? So in case you don't know, during the month of April, we're celebrating financial literacy. And I just wanted to put it out there. Did you know exorbitant medical bills in the United States play a huge part in personal bankruptcies? Almost 60% of US adults have medical debt at some point in their life, and 2/3 of all personal bankruptcies are due to medical bills. So, in honor of Financial Literacy Month, we'll talk about how medical literacy is critical to ensuring a lifetime of financial stability. So, let me start by welcoming our guest today, Dr. Virgie Bright Ellington. Thank you for being with us, Virgie.
So thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And thank you for what you do with helping women on their journey to financial wellness. The work you're doing is good stuff and much needed.
Thank you. Yes, we're all in it together, right?
Yes, we're all in this together.
So I'm just going to do a quick little intro so our listeners know who you are. So Dr. Virgie is a longtime internal medicine physician and also a medical billing expert. But it wasn't until you became a cancer patient facing incredibly high and infirm medical bills that you took your insider industry knowledge and put it to work. So in Dr. Virgie's upcoming book, What Your Doctor Wants You to Know to Crush Medical Debt, she shares her secrets to help individuals, families, and military veterans to protect themselves against America's #1 cause of debt and bankruptcy, medical bills. So thank you again for joining me today. And Dr. Virgie is going to discuss the tools that you need to stop spending money you don't owe and save yourself from becoming a victim of the predatory healthcare system. So before we get into a couple of questions, I'm just going to ask, because that was a very brief intro, if you wouldn't mind sharing with our listeners, expanding on your story, how did you get into medicine and your experience as a cancer patient with this incredible debt and transitioning to becoming a medical billing expert?
Yeah, so oh gosh, going way back, if you want to go back to why I became a physician, when we're little kids and, I want to be this when I grow up. The reason why I became a physician, I wanted to become a doctor, is that I really like talking to old people. And when I was in high school, I was like 14, not old enough to get a job, right? You had to be 16 to get a job. And I asked my mom to lie about my age and say I was 16 so I can get a job and talk to people all day. And she's like, no, I'm not going to lie to move up your age. So the only thing I could do was be a candy striper. So there was this nursing home around the corner that needed volunteers and candy stripers. And that's what I did. And one day I was going around and I saw this guy in a white lab coat and I could tell he was a doctor. And it hit me. I was like, oh my gosh, he's the doctor for this nursing home, which means he gets to spend all day, every day, just talking to old people. Now, I was, a kid. I didn't know that there's a little bit more to it than that, but I was like, ding, 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 that's for me. So that's the long story of why I became a physician. And fast forward, I've been a board certified internal medicine physician for many more years than I'd like to admit, and many years as a health insurance executive. But like you said, Sue, it wasn't until I became a cancer patient that I figured out that most people living in the United States are just one accident or illness away from a lifetime of debt or worse. And I figured out why. So I had to have emergency surgery. I went into the hospital and woke up doing fine, but I had a hospital roommate, and my roommate was this young, sweet mom. I would say she's in her late 20s and the mom of toddlers, girls who weren't in school yet. So she was home with them while her husband worked, you can tell, long hours at a 24-hour diner. So you can tell, they weren't, probably he was making minimum wage, something like that. And that's the only income in their household. Well, she explained to me that she had been in the hospital at that point when I met her already for almost a week getting tests done for a serious illness. And that the year prior, she had been brought into the hospital and had tests done for the same thing and spent about a week. And so she began to tell me that the hospital billing department rep, before she left the hospital, they were discharging her, the rep comes and tells her that she has to sign this form agreeing to pay the bill for her hospital stay. And so I have to tell you, when I heard that, the curtain dropped. I saw red. I was enraged because I knew that she had just signed just a blank slate to sign her family up for a lifetime of debt, if not worse. And I thought, you know what, Virgie, don't get angry, get to getting, do something, right? So that's really when I'd have to say Crush Medical Debt was born. But in that same hospital, for that same hospital visit, about 6 months later, I got a bill from this hospital that was a balance bill. And we can talk later about what a balance bill is. But I got a balance bill for almost $90,000.
Wow.
Now, and I laugh because I looked at the bill, realized that this provider, this medical center, is in network with my insurance. And I called my insurance just to double check. And indeed, they are in network with my insurance. And I said, thank you very much to the insurance representative, and hung up, but was so overwhelmed with, what do you say? You laugh so you don't cry. I had to get it out. I called my best friend and I said, I just have to tell you the story. And I tell her about the bill. I said, this is a $90,000 balance bill, which means that my in-network provider gave me care and sent a bill to my insurance company. My insurance company paid them for what their standard, usual, and customary fee is for the services that was provided. And as being at network, a provider agrees to accept what the insurance company pays as usual and customary. Well, in the case of balanced billing, many, unfortunately, providers will try to send a bill for their retail manufacturer sticker price, full price, and say, well, your insurance only paid this much. You're responsible for the balance. You are not responsible for the balance. That's essentially breach of contract. So I called my best friend and I was, cracking up, laughing, essentially they didn't know they were trying to pull one over on the author of What Your Doctor Wants You to Know to Crush Medical Debt, right? And she said to me, Virgie, she said, you're the only one I know who would be laughing when the rest of us would be curled up in the fetal position someplace crying. Right. And she's absolutely right. And I was laughing because you laugh so you don't cry. And it's the system taking advantage of people who don't know their medical financial rights. They don't have basic medical financial literacy, which, to clarify and to underscore something you said earlier, medical financial literacy is a uniquely United States problem, meaning because we have a system where our medical care is privatized as commercial it's a capitalist system. Okay, well, then we need to know the rules of the road. You need to have financial literacy to be able to pay your medical bills.
Right. Yeah. It's funny because as when we had talked, or I was reading some additional articles since we talked, because I was like, really need to be on top of this, as you say, one step from long-term financial debt if your health is impacted. And I'm thinking, well, why would, if they're in network, how can they charge more? Because the insurance company's already made a deal with them, saying, and if you're in network, that means you've accepted that. But I see what you say. So they're sending out something saying you're responsible for this. And the other thing I noticed, I unfortunately broke my wrist last year in the summer.
Oh boy.
And had to go to PT and OT, and then with some of the specialists. But I noticed the first thing when I went in, even though they were in the network, they made me sign, if your insurance company does not cover, then you were responsible. And I thought about it, and I thought, gosh, I wonder if I said, no, I'm not going to sign this, what would happen? I mean, I signed it because I was in pain and I wanted to get
exactly. But and that's what they're counting on, Sue. Yes.
Okay. So what would happen if I'd actually said to them, no, I'm not signing this? They wouldn't, they couldn't refuse treatment to me, could they?
Exactly. No. So in an emergency situation, thank you so much for bringing that up, Sue. And that's so important. In an emergency situation, you have to be treated. They cannot refuse you treatment on an emergency basis because you don't agree to pay. So that's really, really important. Now, if it's not emergent, then that's a different conversation. But when you're rolling into an emergency room, or you wake up in an emergency room and you say, look, no, I'm not, I don't know what I'm signing. No, don't sign. Don't sign. Don't sign. They will have to give you immediate care and stabilize you before they can say, well, we're going to send you after you're stabilized. And they have to stabilize you. You can't be halfway treated. You have to be safe and no longer in critical condition, or, have acute pain, or because the issue has not been addressed before they can send you out to a facility that's known for being able to provide charity care. So you're absolutely right. Whether it's a for-profit or nonprofit system, the emergency services have to be given without you agreeing to sign anything.
Okay. Ooh, yeah, a lot to learn, right?
Yeah. I do want to make a caveat too. Unfortunately, when more Americans are becoming medically financial literate in terms of learning the tricks of the trade and our rights by federal law to protect us from financial issues with our medical care, instead of having you sign something that's in paper, instead of giving you something in print where you can scratch out the part, I agree to pay whatever my insurance doesn't agree to pay. I agree to pay your balance bill, whatever it is. If you mark that out, you can sign it. You can cross it out and sign it. Well, Sue, what if you're given just those electronic signature pads?
Right.
Where they give you the stylus and they say, okay, blah, 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 behind a mask now in the past 2 years and behind, the COVID plastic barrier, blah, 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 blah. You agree to pay, sign here. You're not given anything in writing. You can't scratch anything out. They just say, blah, 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 sign here. Right. And you're signing a blank check. You're signing a blank piece of paper.
Right.
So I recommend, and I'm at that point now where I tell facilities, and these are facilities that when I don't have to have emergency services, I tell them, no, I'm not signing anything blank. What am I signing? I will sign a piece of paper, give me a piece of paper, but I'm not signing a blank slate.
Right. Yeah. Oh,
thank you for bringing that up, Sue. That's a huge point, and it's happening. Meaning, unfortunately, too many providers, medical systems are replacing the in paper notices of the financial agreement that they practices that they want you to agree to. They're replacing it with just saying verbally, this is what it is, and this is what you're signing. Sign here in this little scratch electronic signature pad, scratch pad, and that's it. Not okay.
Okay. So that's good advice for our listeners in terms of ask for something printed before you sign something electronic if it's not an emergency.
You got it.
So one of the other things, her finance obviously is focused on women. So what's the number one mistake women in their 20s and 30s make that can devastate their financial future?
Yeah, the biggest mistake that women make in their 20s and 30s is deciding, you know what, I'm young, I'm healthy, I don't need health insurance. I'm going to be okay. I don't need to see a doctor. I'm healthy. I run regularly. I'm in shape. Life is awesome. I don't need health insurance. And unfortunately, life happens. It's not something you did. You didn't go out and spend a bunch of money. You didn't go out, and go on a trip with your girls to Aruba. You didn't go out on a spending spree. You maybe had a bike accident. Maybe you fell when you were running. Maybe, unfortunately, you were diagnosed with a serious illness. Again, you didn't ask for any of this, but life happens. And so many folks don't know that the federal law, the American Affordable Care Act, is a federal law that requires people under the age of 29 have the opportunity to buy catastrophic health insurance. So it'll cover major stuff, like if you have to be hospitalized for something major. However, that's only for people under the age of 29. When we age out of that at 29, that's when, if we don't have insurance through an employer, which is the way most of us in this country get our insurance, the ACA has made the marketplace, the individual insurance marketplace, available for that reason. And you want to go on that, sign into your state's ACA insurance marketplace and look for premiums that are monthly premiums that you feel are within your budget, that you think you can swing. The thing about the ACA insurance coverage requirements is that there's a basic, very, very basic, there's some minimal things that every insurance plan in this country has to provide. So that's why it's really important to say, okay, I'm over 29. I've aged out of having the catastrophic. Before you get to 29, at least at minimum, have a catastrophic, sign up for the catastrophic insurance. And then, look for something that may be within your budget that you can swing, try to afford for the monthly premiums, so that you have at least some kind of modicum of minimal coverage over the age of 29.
Right. Yeah, I think all too often when we're younger, we tend to think we're invincible, right? And
yes,
we don't prepare for emergencies, whether it be health or anything else. And I think if COVID has taught us anything, it's we need some type of emergency fund in place. Otherwise, we're putting everything that we have at risk. One of the other things, though, I've come across, and my own personal experience, not really looking at my health insurance coverage. So getting it through, when I was younger, an employer, and not really taking the time to look at the coverage inside and out. So I can understand exactly what I am covered for, because you think, oh, I've got health insurance. If I go to the hospital, if I go to any network provider, I'm covered, or the hospital. But in essence, that's not always true, right? So it's really important to kind of understand exactly what type of insurance you have, and maybe possibly looking, if you have to have treatments, maybe kind of looking at what the procedure is for that, and how much it costs, and kind of just as long as it's not an emergency, just kind of checking that out, I think, behooves us as well, because as you say, there's so much information out there, and I think there's a lot of mistakes that happen as well. So
Great point, Sue. I couldn't have said it better myself. 80 to 90% of every single medical bill that gets generated in the United States have mistakes, have errors. And if you can imagine, if you can guess, do you think they're going to be in favor of the patient, of you? No, they're going to be, unfortunately, in favor of the provider and or the insurance company if you have insurance. So to your point, Sue, about getting back to your point about if you have time to shop for services in terms of prices, that's great. If you have time, if it's not an emergency. But you also want to be aware that part of the ACA, and many of us are not aware, part of the ACA requires that every insurance company provides basic preventive services for free. So that's a big deal, that no matter what insurance you have, if you've bought it through the ACA, the Affordable Care Act marketplace, go online in your state, that there are some basic services, preventive screening services that are covered by federal law, meaning you don't pay any copay. If you have co-insurance as part of your insurance plan, you don't owe the co-insurance, and you don't have to pay part of your deductible that's outside of your deductible. It's covered too.
Right. Yeah. Well, an annual physical would be.
That's actually technically not covered. So you'd be surprised, right?
Wow.
So things like screening mammograms when you're over a certain age, screening colonoscopies when you're over a certain age, HIV testing actually is covered. Right. So there's a list of services that are covered by federal law that has to be covered 100% by your insurance. If you have insurance through the ACA, that is covered.
Yeah. Because I know we do a review, because I'm always saying health is wealth, in order to maintain your wealth, you have to maintain your health, which is key. So I know it took a lot about in October, breast cancer awareness, and
right.
How important it is for women to just go get that test, especially if it's covered with no additional copay under your insurance. I mean, it doesn't make sense not to go get that, right?
You know what, so I'm going to have to get back to you on the actual URL address, because I don't have it memorized, but it's something like cdc.gov/preventive services. I will get back to you and your listeners to get that URL address to you, where you can go in and look up which services are covered. Preventive services are covered 100% for free by your insurance when you have insurance purchased through the ACA.
Okay, great. And then I'll also make sure that's in the show notes for our listeners as well. So one of the other things that I wanted to ask you, because you brought this up, why are women more affected than men by not knowing the only right way to pay a medical bill?
Yeah, there's a couple of reasons, Sue. First is that even though we live longer than men, that's why our life insurance premiums are less expensive. We actually need more care. We have more awesome working parts than men. They need maintenance and checking, and when they work, it's awesome, right? So we do many more visits and we require more maintenance. So that means in our lives, we're going to be exposed to the healthcare, the medical care system, and bills more than the average male. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the best way to protect yourself from overpaying any medical bill is to negotiate all bills. All medical bills are negotiable, but we're not socialized. Women are not socialized to negotiate in this country, right? So those are two big reasons that really contribute to women being at higher risk for significant lifetime of debt if we don't know the correct way to pay a medical bill.
Right.
which is to
Right.
negotiate your bills.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I talk a lot on that just in terms of, because as women, when it comes to our finances, we have more obstacles that are unique to us as women that
Yes.
we have to overcome. And one of them is the negotiation when it comes to your worth and your salary, etc. So yeah, I never really thought that. I'm so glad you brought that up, because I never really thought about that in terms of negotiating your medical bills, because I mean, if you can do it with your credit card, then
there you go. So the right way to pay a medical bill involves 3 steps. Step number 1, call the provider to get an accurate bill. An accurate bill is an itemized bill. An itemized bill has what's called CPT codes. CPT is a mouthful. That's why we only call it CPT, current procedural terminology. That's why we just say CPT codes. But CPT codes are just basically the same thing as like barcodes when you go to a store. Every product in a store has a barcode. You swipe it, the price comes up. Same thing with CPT codes. Every medical service, test, procedure, visit in this country has a CPT code assigned to it. And every provider assigns a price to that product, to that CPT code. So in order for you to have be able to have a basis to negotiate and know what you're dealing with, you have to have an accurate bill, which contains the CPT codes. Step 2, after you get the medical bill, the accurate bill that has the CPT codes, then you use those codes to Google what Medicare pays for those services. Medicare is, yes, it is federal insurance for folks that are over a certain age, and in some cases, a disability and renal dialysis, kidney dialysis, with chronic kidney failure. But it is the standard which medical care in this country actually marks their prices against. So most providers charge on average about 300 to 500% higher than what Medicare pays for the exact same service. So if you got your CPT code for the services that you got, you look it up, see what Medicare pays, then you're ready for step 3, which is to say, you know what, you charge me this, I'm willing to pay this. But this is what Medicare pays. I'm willing to pay you twice what Medicare pays, but not a penny more. And there you go, the right way to pay a medical bill.
Wow. Hey, this is really a lesson for me. I didn't know any of this. It's great. You learn something new every day, right? So one of the other things that I wanted to ask you about was, I'm just sorry, I'm looking at the time. I mean, the time goes so fast. So we had, or you had mentioned to me reasons people in the US overpay for medical bills. So what are the top 5 reasons that people do overpay for medical bills?
Top reason we just talked about is that we don't negotiate our bills. Number 2, that we actually qualify for all, if not, let me back up, part, if not all of our medical bills to be written off, to sliding scale according to our income. And that's particularly and I'm focusing on nonprofit medical centers and hospitals and facilities. Number 3, we rush and pay off our medical bills with a credit card, or we take out a loan or take out a HELOC, a home equity loan on our home. No, because as soon as you pay it off, the provider has no incentive at all to negotiate with you to lower your bill at a more appropriate rate. Right. Number 4, your care gets denied inappropriately by your insurance company. If you have insurance and they deny it, for instance, you had to go into the emergency room, Sue, last year, you broke your wrist, unfortunately, and then you get a notice from an EOB, an explanation of benefits notice of what they're willing to pay the provider bill that was sent to them for your care. They said, well, no, that wasn't an emergency. No, that doesn't qualify for that. So we're not going to pay for that. Wait,
Right.
what? That's an extreme example, but there are some unfortunate examples where that happens. Five, and one of the biggest reasons why we overpay, most Americans overpay their medical bills, is that they get balance billed. They get balance billed, which again is when your in-network provider charges your insurance, you for the difference between what your insurance pays, the usual and customary rate that by contract, by being in network, the provider agreed to, they send the balance of what their retail rate would be and what your insurance paid, your in-network insurance paid. So those are the top 5 reasons why most of us overpay our medical bills in this country.
Ooh. This is definitely food for thought. One of the other things that I did want to just kind of go back on as we talk about all of this and the importance of women, number one, making sure that they have some type of insurance in the event that something happens, right? That's kind of key. But also, I think just thinking in terms of if people are in a position to be able to do this, is the health savings account, a HSA.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the reasons I mentioned that is because I know Fidelity talks about, when we get into retirement, they've done lots of surveys and have statistics on this. But just in terms of like a 65-year-old couple retiring can expect to spend maybe $300,000 in healthcare and medical expenses throughout their retirement, even when they're enrolled right in Medicare.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for a single retiree, the 2021 estimate was like 157,000 for women, which is an incredible amount of money and goes back to what you were saying earlier, because I never thought about a women, yes, we live longer and will need more support, but didn't think about it in terms of having more moving parts. Never thought about it from that perspective. But I just think that, again, as we think about retirement and, being able to live a quality life and be able to, also afford to kind of cover our cost. I think, if at work you're eligible for a HSA, because it is a tax favored account that's really designed for employees with high deductible, I should say, health plans, and that it helps you pay uncovered medical, dental, and vision and pharmacy expenses that, can transition. And again, it's like anything else in terms of an investment. You can, the earlier you start and put in, then you can start looking at, okay, well, if this is doing a 7% return each year in my retirement, then you're going to be able to kind of cover, depending on when you started putting money in, the cost of what to me is exorbitant.
It is. So let's talk about HSA's health savings account. So this is the thing, not all of us are eligible for HSA. So let's talk a little bit about that and why it's important to have medical financial literacy even when you are fortunate enough to have an HSA. So an HSA is, you're eligible for an HSA if you have insurance through your employer that's a high deductible health plan. And then the numbers change, from year to year, they grow, increase every year in terms of how much the deductible has to be to make that number. The last time I checked, I think it was like $2,500 is the annual deductible. And it may be more, but just to give you the concept, that's the concept.
Right.
So if you're fortunate enough to work for an employer and you have you can afford a high deductible health plan, great. You have an HSA. Awesome. Now, so you take your HSA money that you put into it and you can pay tax-free the resources that you spend on out-of-pocket healthcare expenses, medical care expenses. But this is the thing. you're going to go through your HSA a lot faster if you're overpaying your medical bills, if you don't have medical financial literacy, if you're getting balanced billed, if your care should have been paid for and it wasn't, if you had, for instance, preventive care, let's say a screening mammogram, which is covered by law, again, federal law, if you have insurance no coverage of that service out of pocket. Let's say they said, well, you know what, you have a history of breast cancer. So this isn't, what if the radiologist says to you when you show up and you have a history of treated breast cancer in your past, and you show up for your screening mammogram and they say, you know what, Virgie, you have a history of breast cancer in your past. This is not screening. This is actually diagnostic. So that means it's going to cost you, and you have to pay before you go in. You're going to have to give us a card for $248. No, nice try, but no cigar, as my brother used to say. No. When that happens to you and they're arguing with you and telling you, no, this is diagnostic, meaning is to diagnose. You could have cancer again. You could still have cancer. It's not screening, it's diagnostic. Stop everything, call your provider who wrote the requisition, sent you for the screening mammogram, the preventive service, in this case, screening mammogram, and confirm that it is screening and not diagnostic. So an example of, yes, HSAs are great if you're fortunate enough to have them, but we all need to have some basic medical financial literacy to make sure we're not taken advantage of, to run through that HSA even faster and want to hold on to it as much as possible.
Right. Yeah. I think clearly I'm going to have to read your upcoming book, What Your Doctor Wants You to Know to Crush Your Medical Debt. So with that, unfortunately, we are at our hour, and I could sit and talk to you all day about this, because for me now, this is fascinating, learning about this. And as you say, it's like I talk to women all the time when they're worried about, they have avoidance, or they're afraid, or have fears around money. And it's like, it's all about literacy. It's all about, taking small steps and familiarizing yourself with some type of literacy around finance each day. And then you'll find yourself at the end of the month thinking, oh, wow, gosh, I feel a little more comfortable now looking at X, Y, and Z. And I think it's the same thing when it comes to medical financial literacy, right? So I'm recommending everybody needs to buy this book so we can, focus on not only our health care, but our finances as well.
That's right.
So, Dr. Virgie, where or when are you going to be publishing, and how can people get a hold of your book?
So the book is going to be released, Crush Medical Debt, or What Your Doctor Wants You to Know to Crush Medical Debt, is being released May 19th. In the meantime, you can visit me. I always tell folks, I want to be a part of your journey to medical and financial health and wellness. And you can find me and that information that we talked about. For instance, you can get a free downloadable PDF of the one right way to pay a medical bill, the 3 steps, right, to the one right way to pay a medical bill. You can get that at crushmedicaldebt.com.
And I will make sure that is in the show notes, so people know where to access you. And maybe I'll pop in your LinkedIn profile. Will that work as well?
In terms of
just people
finding what?
Or is that the best way to connect with you, the URL?
Oh, either way, yes, you can connect with me, sure, on LinkedIn. I think it's linkedin.com/Dr. Virgie, DrVirgie. And I think it's also linkedin.com, Virgie Bright Ellington, MD. You'll find me there, but also, yes, at the site is crushmedicaldebt.com.
Okay.
Yep, you can find me there. I'd love to connect with you.
Thank you. So, well, thank you again, Dr. Virgie, for sharing your story and your expertise with our listeners today. It's been a pleasure. It's been certainly an eye-opener for me, and I'm sure everybody else listening. So, this was great. I thoroughly enjoyed us chatting, and look forward to having you on the show again, maybe after you've published the book. So that would be great. So thank you.
My honor, my privilege. Thanks for having me, Sue. Much, much appreciated.
Oh, you're very welcome. So just for our listeners, as we'd mentioned, April is Financial Literacy Month, and this is a great reminder for everybody to take a few small steps to help improve your financial health and make better money decisions. So I also will put in the show notes, just as part of Financial Literacy Month, we have a self-care guide, a couple of tips on healthy financial self-care habits that can keep you feeling positive and encouraged. So you can download that. So I just want to take the time to remind everyone, Her Finance Talk is brought to you by the Her Finance Club. Our goal is to inspire 1 million women to start the money conversation, whether it be with your spouse, friends, or colleagues, because knowledge is power. And when that knowledge helps you become more independent, it translates to empowerment. So thank you again, everybody, for taking time out of your busy schedule to come listen to us today. And here's to your financial well-being. Until the next time. Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.